Ursula Herrmann's 10-year-old daughter, Amelsie, was very excited to get back to her normal life after summer vacation. After Ursula got out of school, she went to her gymnastics class and then to see her cousin. They ate dinner together, and at 7:20 p.m., Ursula got on her bike and rode home. When Ursula did not come home that night after a 10-minute walk through a dark bush, it became a mystery. Ursula's parents and other family members gathered in the woods and called her name, but all they heard was an echo. There was no answer, and little Ursula could not be found anywhere. What happened that night to Ursula? Was she hurt in an accident, or did a wild animal kill her? Hi and welcome back to our channel. If you are new here, please consider subscribing, as it helps us motivate to create more intriguing content for you. Let's have a look at the case of the girl in the box. In the very southern part of Germany, near the foothills of the Alps, there is a huge lake called the Sea. Along the shores of Sea are towns that have been there for hundreds of years and have beautiful views. At the north end of the lake, there are two such villages called Eching and Schondorf. Their beautiful landscape and places on the water are their biggest draws. A block of spruce forest separates the two towns. Hunters, joggers, and people who ride mountain bikes like to go there. Rich people from Munich often buy second homes here so they can come here on the weekends. Well, it is a great place for kids to get away. You might get so lost in the beauty of these towns that you forget that almost 42 years ago, this is where Germany's most shocking crime happened. On November 24, 1970, Ursula Herrmann was born in the German state of Bavaria. She grew up in the town of Eching with her parents, Anna Louise and Michael Herrmann, two older brothers, Michael and Hans, and an older sister. Her father was a teacher, and her mother took care of the house. By September 1981, when Ursula was 10 years old, she had grown into a bright and active girl. She had brightly colored hair with bangs that fell just over her bright eyes. Ursula's older brother, Michael Herrmann, remembered that he had complimented Ursula on how smart and mature she was. She was always a little older than her peers. Her friends were not afraid to be spontaneous and wild sometimes, but Ursula was always very careful, which was unusual for a girl her age. Ursula was 8 years younger than Michael, but Michael said that Ursula was a happy and caring girl. She was a child who liked to follow the rules, so when her friends did something that was not right, it would sometimes bother her. Ursula was also good at sports and worked hard. When school was over, she would go to the village next door to learn how to tumble and do gymnastics. Ursula also liked to play the piano with her brother Michael, and she was always ready to take off on her red bike. Ursula had no idea that she would take her last ride on a terrible September night. In Eching, the new school year started on Tuesday, September 15, 1981. Ursula was looking forward to a fun day at school where she could catch up with her friends. As usual, she went home in the afternoon after a pretty normal day at school. Ursula and her brother Michael practiced playing the piano together. At 5 p.m., Ursula left for her gymnastics and tumbling classes. She got on her bike and rode to Schondorf, the town next door where her cousin lived and where she went to school with her. Ursula chose to go to her cousin's house after that. Ursula and her cousin had a good time playing and talking. The rest of the family joined them for dinner at 7:15 p.m. Ursula's mother called her sister in Schondorf, where Ursula was staying that night. She asked her to tell Ursula that it was getting dark and she had to get home right away because it was getting cold. Ursula rode her bike away from her cousin's house at about 7:20 p.m. From Ursula's cousin's house in Schondorf to her own house in Eching was not far. Ursula was out for half an hour, but she never went home. At about 7:50 p.m., Ursula's mother called her sister again and asked where Ursula was. The aunt of Ursula was now sounding worried. She said that Ursula had left about 25 minutes ago and should be home by now. Ursula's parents knew right away that there was something wrong. From Schondorf to Eching was only 3 kilometers, so it should have only taken Ursula 10 minutes to get home. In the area, there was a road that went through a spruce forest called Weinkilten, and along Lake Amelsi. Ursula had been on this road many times before, so she knew it very well. There was almost no chance that she would get lost in the forest. Her parents and brothers were very worried about her. Ursula's father went into the bush himself to look for her. The same thing happened to Ursula's uncle, who left his home in Scharndorf and headed for the spruce forest. They called Ursula's name many times, but all they heard was the sound of fast-moving trees in the background. Ursula's father and uncle met in the middle of the way, but Ursula was not there. Ursula's father called the police, and about a half hour later, at 8:35 p.m., there were many police officers and a few sniffer dogs looking for Ursula in the forest. Search groups made up of police officers, firefighters, and some helpful neighbors went through the forest to look for Ursula. Around 11:15 p.m., a sniffer dog led the cops to Ursula's red bicycle. It was found about 20 meters off the road, but Ursula could not be found anywhere. Ursula was probably carried from this point on because the dog did not find any more signs of her. The cops did not think Ursula was in an accident because the bike was found away from the lake and closer to the forest. As the night got darker, it started to rain very hard. Dozens of police officers in raincoats and rubber boots looked for the little girl in the bush all night long with their flashlights on. They did not find her until the sun came up. Police boats and divers were also brought in to make sure the whole lake was checked out. A chopper was sent up to look over the forest. Local radio reported the shocking news that a girl had gone missing and gave a description of her. She was 4 feet 7 inches tall, had short blonde hair, and was wearing dark green cords, a gray woolen cardigan, and red-brown shoes. Even though they looked hard for Ursula, they could not find her. On Thursday morning, September 17, 1981, about 36 hours after Ursula went missing, they got a sad phone call. Ursula's dad picked up the phone, but there was no answer. Over the next few hours, Ursula's house got 3 more strange calls. The cops then set up their station inside the Hellman home and started to record the calls. Almost every caller was quiet the whole time, and then hung up, leaving only a jingle that played twice in a row for 3 seconds each. At the end of the call, there was also a strange tapping sound. The cops did not know for sure, but it sounded like someone was rewinding a tape recorder. But the Hellmans recognized the song right away. The radio station Bayern 3 used the tune for a traffic report. Still, no one knew what the calls were about. Ursula's home got a letter in the morning on September 18, 3 days after she went missing. Ursula's father opened the urgently marked letter. He opened it and found a ransom note. The note was written in broken German using words from newspaper stories that had been cut out. The message conveyed to the Hellmans was identical to stating, "Your daughter has been taken. To ensure her safe return, a payment of 2 million German marks is required. If you involve the police or fail to comply with the payment, your daughter will be harmed." The note further instructed the Hellmans that if they agreed to pay, they needed to confirm their agreement during a phone call following the playing of a specific song. It turned out that the post office made a mistake that no one saw coming. The kidnappers thought the letter would arrive the day before, which is why they called the Hellmans on Thursday. They were waiting for a response to their ransom note. In the afternoon of the same day, the people who took Ursula called her home again. This time, Ursula's mother answered, and when the song played, as planned, she confirmed that she and her husband had agreed to pay the ransom money. She asked the people who had taken Ursula for proof that she was still living. She inquired about the names of Ursula's 2 stuffed animals. The caller remained silent, offering no response. Ursula's mother, filled with frustration, shouted, demanding some information about Ursula. However, the caller remained silent once again and abruptly ended the call. The Hellmans did not have as much money as some of the other people who lived in Aching and the parents of the children who went to the private school in Scharndorf. They also did not have any rich family or friends. A kind friend helped the Hellmans by raising some of the money they needed. The rest of the money came from the government in that area. On Monday, September 21, 1981, the Hellmans got a second ransom note. This one had directions for how to send the ransom money. The note told the family to pay with used 100 Deutsche Mark bills packed into a bag. The kidnappers also said that Ursula's father would do everything. Ursula's father was supposed to bring the ransom money by himself and drive a yellow Fiat 600 at no more than 56 miles per hour or 90 kilometers per hour. The cops thought that the car requirement was strange since the Fiat 600 was not very common in Germany at the time. The note also told the Hellmans to wait for further directions on when and where to drop off the ransom. Both the family and the police waited patiently for further orders. 2 weeks went by, and the kidnappers still had not said anything. As time went on, Ursula's family became more and more worried as they kept thinking of bad things that could happen. The Hellmans thought the worst. On October 1, 1981, the Hellmans had not heard from the kidnapper in days, so the police chose to search the spruce forest again. This time, more than 100 police officers and 10 sniffer dogs spread out through the forest to look for hints or anything they might have missed before. The search went on for 4 days, and on October 4, 1981, at 9:30 a.m., an officer found an area in the woods about 800 meters from the path next to the lake. When he looked at the area more, he found something underneath the ground. He told all the other officers in the area, who soon joined him in the clearing. It looked like someone had tried to block the area with 5 small spruce trees. The cops started digging and soon found a brown blanket. When they moved it, they found a wooden board underneath that looked like the lid of a wooden box. The lid was taken off, and under it was another wooden board, but this one was painted green. It was 72 centimeters in length and 60 centimeters wide. It was held in place with 7 bolts that could slide. The cops forced it open and took a look inside. Ursula's cold, dead body was found inside the wooden box 19 days after she went missing. As they took Ursula's body out of the box, the cops cried. Ursula's parents were told right away about the find. It was a very terrible time for the Hellmans, and now all they wanted was for the person who did it to be locked up. Ursula's mother asked if Ursula had been hurt or abused before her death. At that point, the cops could not answer that question, so they sent Ursula's body to a mortician for a more in-depth look. The cops did not waste any time opening the box. It weighed about 60 kilograms and was found buried in the ground standing straight up, like a phone booth. It had an improvised seat that acted as a toilet, and a bucket of water was put under it. In front of the seat was a shelf that doubled as a desk. The cops also found 12 cans of Fanta, 6 large chocolate bars, 3 bottles of water, 4 packs of cookies, 2 packs of chewing gum, an apple juice box, a portable light, and a radio set to the Bayern 3 station. A set of 21 comic books was also in the box. These comics had stories about Donald Duck, romance, thrillers, and the Old West. The detectives also found a bell wire hanging from the nearby trees. The box also had a badly made venting system made of plastic plumbing pipes. One end went down to the ground, and the other opened just above the box to let air pass through. But this setup needed a pump or a fan to work properly and move the air. Without the pump, all of the oxygen inside the box would be used up, leaving only carbon dioxide in the air. When the police found Ursula's body, her head was turned back and her eyes were closed. She was sitting on the homemade seat. On her lap is a plastic bag that has a tracksuit inside. The autopsy report came back and said that Ursula was not hurt or abused in any way before she died. The report also said that she died within 30 minutes to 5 hours of being buried. The agents thought that Ursula had been drugged before being put in the box, since there were no signs of her struggling or fighting back. Inside the box was locked, and there were no scratches or breaks in the inner covering. Ursula's body did not have any needle marks, and no drugs were found in her body. The medical examiners thought Ursula's kidnappers must have used nitrous oxide to knock her out, but there were no tests for this at the time, so they could not confirm this idea. The pathologists found 2 discolored spots on either side of Ursula's larynx, but for some reason, They did not look into this any further. Ursula was put to rest in her hometown of Ecking a few days after her body was found. Ursula's funeral was very sad for her family. When a reporter held a camera up to Ursula's brother Michael's face at the funeral, Michael knocked the camera to the ground. When the cops looked at the box more closely, they were able to get a fingerprint from one of the pieces of duct tape and a DNA sample from a tiny strand of hair that was wrapped around a screw. They also thought that since the box weighed about 60 kilograms, there were probably at least 2 people involved. It would be very hard for a single person to carry a box that big. The cops were doing a lot to find the people who took Ursula. They put out a prize of 30,000 Deutsche Marks for anyone who could help catch the people who took the children. In the days that followed, the police got a lot of tips. Most of them led to a man named Vernal Mazurek. Mazurek lived with his wife and 2 children only a few hundred meters away from the Hillmans. Mazurek was a trained car mechanic who was 31 years old. He was big and strong, and he was known for getting angry easily. When the cops looked into him more, they found that Mazurek owed 140,000 Deutsche Marks. The cops talked to Mazurek a week after Ursula's body was found. When the cops asked him where he was the night Ursula went missing, he did not have an alibi at first. But the next day, he told the police that Ursula went missing while he was playing board games with his wife and 2 friends. The police searched Mazurek's house carefully, but they did not find anything that could link him to Ursula's disappearance. A month later, they checked to see if Mazurek's fingerprints were on the piece of tape that was found at the crime scene. But the fingerprints did not match up. The cops still were not sure that Mazurek was innocent, so they did not let him go. In January 1982, Mazurek and 2 of his friends were arrested. He and his 2 friends were questioned by the police for several days, but they were all soon let go without any charges. About a month after that, Klaus Pfeffinger was questioned by the cops. Mazurek knew Pfeffinger, who was a jobless mechanic. Pfeffinger was questioned because his landlord told the police that he would see Pfeffinger going on his moped with a spade tied to the side a few weeks before Ursula went missing. At first, Pfeffinger said he was innocent, but on the second day of questioning, he told the police that in September 1981, Mazurek had asked him to dig a hole in the forest. In exchange, Mazurek had offered to give him 1,000 German marks and a TV. Pfeffinger also said that he saw a box put in the hole later. The police were happy because they thought they were almost done with this case, but when they asked Pfeffinger to lead them to the spot in the forest where he dug the hole, Pfeffinger could not find it. He then changed his mind about what he said, and he was not charged with anything. In 1982, 2 students from a local boarding school brought a bell wire to the cops. The kids said that they found this wire in the spruce forest while chasing an owl about 8 months after Ursula went missing. They wrote it down and put it in a locked box in their room. The cops decided that Ursula's abductors must have used this wire as an alarm system when they took her. They thought that when one of the kidnappers saw a possible victim, he or she would have used the system to alert the other through a buzzer or a light bulb tied to the other end of the wire. In Ursula's case, the police looked at all the proof again because they wanted to move forward and find more clues. On one of the ransom notes, they saw a drawing of a mathematical chance tree. This made the cops think that the kidnappers might be younger than they thought. They also thought that this could be the work of a few kids. Even though this helped narrow down the list of possible suspects, it was not strong enough to point them to one person in particular. The police also noticed that one ransom note came from Landsberg and the other from the area around Munich, which is 20 kilometers west and east of the crime scene, respectively. It also seemed likely that the calls asking for money were made from a phone box. The detectives did not get very far by following these dead-end leads, and finally, the investigation slowed down and the case went cold. In 2004, after Ursula's case had been closed for 22 years, investigators chose to look into it again. They looked at all of the possible suspects and all of the clues again to see if they could find anything new. With new developments in DNA technology, the police were able to get a DNA analysis from a sample of DNA taken from a piece of hair found at the original crime scene. In 2007, it seemed like the hard work of the detectives had paid off. The sample was used to make a DNA profile, which matched one of the other profiles in the police's DNA database. The sample fit the description of a man from Munich named Benedikt Toth. Benedikt was already standing trial for killing his rich aunt, Charlotte Bollinger, in 2006. But Benedikt was ruled out as a possibility because, when the case was being looked into in 2007, he was 33 years old. This meant that he would have been only 7 or 8 years old when Ursula was taken in 1981. The detectives were upset because they had made a mistake while making the DNA profile, which gave them a bad result. Ursula's case was not seen as a murder in Germany. Instead, it was called a kidnapping with an accidental death. As a result, the time limit on the case was 30 years. The investigators were running out of time to solve Ursula's case. They only had 4 years left to put the kidnappers in jail, or else the kidnappers would be free and no longer be responsible for the crime they did all those years ago. Investigators looked at the original suspects from 1981 again. They could not look into Pfeffinger because he had died in 1990. The detectives thought that Pfeffinger was telling the truth when he said that he dug a hole for Mazurek. He knew some specifics about the case, like how big the box was. The police say that only someone who was involved in the crime could know these facts. But the hair found at the crime scene did not match Pfeffinger's DNA sample. Since Pfeffinger was no longer around to help with the new probe, the investigators started keeping an eye on Mazurek. They listened in on his phone calls and even sent a spy to befriend him. A few months later, the police went to Mazurek's house and took a DNA sample from him. When the test results came back, it turned out that Mazurek's DNA sample did not match the hair found at the crime scene either. The police went to Mazurek's home and found an old reel-to-reel tape recorder. A sound expert was hired, and the 1981 tapes of the jingle were given to him or her. The sound expert was told to look at this tape recorder and figure out if it was used to make those jingles back in the day. The sound expert spent hours testing and looking at the recorder for months. He said that the recording was messed up because the camera was broken and had a technical flaw. This distortion was also in the original recordings of the song from 1981. The expert concluded that the recorder that was found in Mazurek's house was most likely the one that was used to record and play the jingle back in 1981. Mazurek was caught on May 28, 2008, and charged with kidnapping Ursula Herrmann. The trial started in February 2009 in Germany's original court of Augsburg. Families can go to court as co-plaintiffs. Both of Ursula's parents were asked to do this, but neither of them agreed because they did not want to go through the pain and stress of losing their daughter all over again. But Ursula's older brother, Michael, stood in as a co-plaintiff. He could look at all the evidence, material, and notes from the investigation. He was also allowed to be there and ask the judge and witnesses questions. Michael was a music teacher, and he did not like hearing half-truths. During the first few weeks of the trial, Michael read through all 6,000 pages of the case file. Mazurek said he was innocent, and most of the proof against him was not direct. The officials said that Mazurek was motivated to do the crime because he was in a lot of debt at the time Ursula was taken, and since he was a repairman, it would have been easy for him to build the box. The prosecutors also brought up Mazurek's past convictions for theft and forgery to show how angry and bad-tempered he was. The lawyers told about a time in 1974 when Mazurek killed a dog. The dog had emptied the trash can onto the kitchen floor. Then Mazurek grabbed the dog and put it in the freezer in the basement. When his wife went to the freezer to get some meat, she found the dog already dead. But two pieces of evidence that were a little bit controversial were the prosecution's most important move. The sound expert's opinion about the tape player came first. Mazurek defended himself by saying that he had bought the tape player at a flea market just a few weeks before his house was searched. But Mazurek could not prove this because he could not show the police who sold it to him. Also, no one at the market seemed to believe that the recorder was sold there. Fayfinger's confession was the second piece of proof. The prosecution thought that Fayfinger's first statement was true. They said that Fayfinger did not leave the cops to the place where the box was found on purpose so he could get out of jail. Prosecutors also confirmed that Fayfinger knew some facts about the crime scene when he stated in 1981. For example, he knew the size of the box and what the burial site looked like. In 2010, all of the prosecution's points were enough to convince the jury to charge Mazurek with kidnapping Ursula Herrmann. Mazurek was found guilty and given a life term for his crime. Mazurek's wife was also on trial for being a part of the crime, but she was found not guilty because there was not enough proof. Many people were glad that the case was finally solved and the criminal was in jail, but Michael, Ursula's brother, was not sure that Mazurek was the one who did it. Michael was not sure that Mazurek was involved in Ursula's kidnapping. Michael did not believe what Fayfinger said because he was known to be an alcoholic and used to have dreams while he was in jail. Michael brought up the fact that when Fayfinger was questioned, he changed his story more than once. Michael also thought that the media was how Fayfinger found out about the box and where it was buried. Michael tried to get the court to review the case, but the court said no. Then Michael came up with an idea. In 2013, Michael sued Mazurek in civil court for 20,000 euros. He said that Mazurek was responsible for his tinnitus because the case had caused him psychological stress. Michael thought this would make the judge look at the case again, because Mazurek would say he was wrongly guilty and should not have to pay for the damages. But in August 2018, the court ruled that Mazurek was guilty and told him to pay Michael 7,000 euros for giving him tinnitus. The trial did affect Michael. His health got worse, his job went downhill, and he broke up with his wife. Michael did not think Ursula's case was solved, but he could not stop looking for the truth. Even though Mazurek was given a sentence for kidnapping Ursula, many people, including Ursula's older brother Michael, thought he was wrongly convicted. This idea came from how clumsy the cops were when they were looking into the first crime scene. There were some mistakes made by the detectives, like the fact that Fayfinger's confession was never written down or recorded. Instead, a cop wrote down, weeks later, what he remembered from the interrogation of Fayfinger in an unsigned statement. Even Fayfinger's wife spoke up for him. She told the cops that Fayfinger was an alcoholic who was too lazy to dig a hole that big for Mazurek. The public also said that when the box was found, the police did not quickly block off the crime scene. Since the media and the public were free to go to the crime scene, any footprints the kidnappers might have left would have been lost. Also, the brown blanket that was found on top of the box was given to a junior officer, who took it home and washed it. Any clues that could have been found on the blanket were also gone because it had been washed. People thought that since time was running out, the police charged Mazurek with Ursula's kidnapping, because a wrong convict is better than no convict. Ursula's case is still thought of as a kidnapping with deadly results. Many people think that by locking Mazurek up, the cops let Ursula and her family down. Ursula was a lively, funny girl whose life was cut short too soon. She lost the chance to live a happy life. Michael still does not believe Mazurek is guilty and wants real answers. He persists in his attempts to have the case reopened, and a letter was written to the court expressing doubts about the guilt or innocence of the accused. The official closure of Ursula's case does not provide clarity regarding the true perpetrator of her abduction on that fateful September night in 1981. What do you think about Mazurek's guilty verdict? Was he given a fair trial? Do you think Fayfinger would have stuck to his original position if he was still around? Tell us what you think in the comments section. Please like, share, and subscribe. Stay safe until next time, and thanks for watching.